Hello, everyone. My name is Rachel. We will now move into the professional development discussion. We have really amazing panelists with incredible and diverse backgrounds, so I think you'll find this very insightful. This is an open discussion, so anyone can feel free to unmute themselves and ask a question, or you can put it in the chat. So I'll go ahead and introduce our panelists briefly. Ms. Dorcas Omole is a consultant specializing in sustainable seed systems and food security and provides advisory services. She works in market and industry research, data analysis, and reviews business plans for seed startups in Nigeria, Kenya, and Rwanda. Mr. Mela Sadoko is a food fortification and nutritious foods development advisor and the Nutrition and Food Quality Service at the United Nations World Food Program headquarters. He previously worked at Africa Rice and has worked on various humanitarian projects as well. Ms. Jocelyn Palapo is the Director of Human Resources at the World Vegetable Center. She has experience in international nonprofit, private, and public sectors. She's also a PhD candidate and has postgraduate degrees in law and industrial relations. And Dr. Thank God Ogbuche is a researcher in the cassava breeding unit at the International Institute of Tropical Agriculture headquarters in Nigeria. He's collaborated with independent growers and processors and has worked in transferring growing technologies to 13 African countries through public to private partnerships. He's also worked at NextGen, Harvest Plus, Basics, RTB Foods, and Genetic Stocks. So I'll go ahead and start with the first question, and then I will open it up to anyone. So for all the panelists, how did you determine your career path and what factors influenced your decision-making process?
Yeah, good morning, everyone. Good afternoon, good evening, depending on where you are. I'll quickly show my face, then I'll turn off the video because of network issue. I'm in Africa and in Nigeria. So we used to have network issues there. So I may go up the video and just communicate to answer some of your questions. I think you can see my face. All of you can see my face now.
We can see you, thank you.
Yeah. So can you hear me clearly? Can you hear me now?
Yes, very clearly.
Yeah. So I want to make a correction from the title doctor. I'm not a doctor yet. I am still on my PhD program. I just want to correct that. It's minor, but we are together. Yeah, my name is Oguche Tangod. I work with Cassava Breeding Unit of ITA, just as you introduced. I am a cassava breeder as well as a seed system expert. And this is my 8 years working with a research institution. ITA is a sister center for 1CG, and the ITA is mandated to transform African agriculture here in sub-Saharan Africa. And talking about my career pathway, I think that is the question you've thrown to us. And as I communicated with it, I want to appreciate the organizer of this program. This is a very good, fruitful program, and I know this program going to help all of us here in Africa, help our young scientists, upcoming scientists in terms of deciding the career pathway and what they need to apply, especially when you are looking at Africa as a whole. And because of my tight schedule, I've been discussing with Dr. Paul that I'm actually in a conference in Abuja, which is a Nigeria plant breeding conference, and I'll be having some presentation in the next 2 or 3 hours. So I will only spare this time to communicate with the audience. I may not be available for the next panel discussion. Yeah, as I said, my career pathway has been on the aspect of innovative cassava breeding as well as seed system. So I created a course by passing through trainings with a research organization which I've seen and dreamed to work with, which is the IIT, International Institute of Tropical Agriculture. So I've been able to undergo some internship training and some fellowship training. I was trained actually in that institution, which is the International Institute of Tropical Agriculture. I did my MSc with the University of UI, Ibadan, which is University of Ibadan in Nigeria. So, and I work as a research fellow with IIT. So during the process of working with IIT, I've been able to equip myself knowing fully whether I may want to develop a career pathway through the path of breeding and seed system. So I've been able to work and equip myself delivering on some of the roles. So, and that has actually helped me to channel or streamline my career towards research. So now I am in research field because this is the area I wanted, I've desired to be. So what I did was to be able to equip myself through internship training with the institution to get first-hand knowledge and first-hand skills on what I may be doing when I'm delivering my role. So it has been a good career pathway for me. So training is very, very important when it comes to that. Try to know the career pathway you want to be as a graduate student. Of course, most of the graduate students now, they are in the university environment. Some of them are doing a lot of lab activities. Some of them are focusing more on publications, releasing journals. But I want to also encourage and motivate them that beyond that is a good aspect. There is a good time for networking as well. So the graduate student should also find a way to network, get connections outside the lab, as well as maybe publications or concentrating in writing journals for publications. They should also find a time to also relate research as well as a networking and attending of events in order to meet some of the actors and stakeholders, other stakeholders. This is where they can create that niche by having some knowledge of the industries, having knowledge that is outside the school environment, which is the campus environment, especially when they have the mindset of going out to work even after their whole program, even after the program, the graduate program in their universities, respective universities. Please, I don't know if you can hear me loud.
Yes, we can. Thank you very much
Okay.
for your response. If any of the other panelists would also like to provide feedback on that or have any thoughts or comments.
I hope you can hear me.
Yes, I can hear you. Thank you.
Perfect. Yeah, thanks a lot, Rachel. I hope I'm pronouncing the name very well. And many thanks for the invitation as well. When I joined maybe around 20 minutes ago and I saw up to 90 people, I'm like, wow, this is impressive. So very happy to meet with my, I would say, fellow Africans, citizens of the world, researchers, and wherever you're working. So it's a great pleasure to be here and to share a bit of, I would say, tips or do's and don'ts or some experiences as well. And I think it's a journey. We are also still learning. I wouldn't say that we know everything about career development. I have mentors. I have people who still tell me do this, do that, don't do this. So I believe it's also going to be just a session of experience sharing as well. As you've also mentioned, I work for the World Food Program. I'm in my 4th year. I'm based in Rome. I'm in Rome at the moment, working on food fortification and everything development of nutritious foods, and that takes me around, different continents and traveling and doing missions and providing strategic or technical assistance to different countries on food fortification related matters or food system related matters in general. I wanted to add perhaps 1 or 2 points to what Thank God has said. I think for me, one key thing which really matters is the passion. I always say that passion can drive one crazy, and I really mean it, because passion is what will get you working beyond 5 p.m., though that's not what's recommended. But passion is what will give you, it will give you that extra energy to do what's requested of you and also to go beyond that. Passion is what will make you stand out as well, because I believe we are in a very competitive market right now. I think it's a fact. We just have to recognize that. And if you really don't stand out, if there's nothing very special about you, I think it'll be very hard for you to really have a job or maybe a career that's really impressive. That's my opinion. So I think the first thing that really drove me into, I would say, food industry or everything food or food systems is really the passion. I think even when I was not yet at the university, I love eating. I love good food. I believe food is our first medicine. I just wanted to make sure that people have the right food on their plates. And when I'm talking about food, I don't get tired at all. So it's a passion. I really love this subject, and I do extra research, and it gives me that extra energy as well. So that's what kind of made me to say, based on this passion, based on all this energy, these are the gaps that I'm missing. Perhaps let me do a bachelor's degree, maybe in food technology. From there, what else is missing? Let me do a master's. Let me add another master's. And I kept going, and then I was able to build also, I would say, my education background. I was able to do internship. Thank God has just talked about that as well. It's also very important as well. When you do internship, you are basically exploring. You are basically trying to see if this is really meant for me. So with a passion, with your education, you do internship, you learn from your mentors as well. You speak to people, and then you make a final decision and say, yes, this is the right thing for me. And if I'm to be very honest as well, from time to time, it's not that I doubt where I am right now, but I feel like sometimes I ask myself, well, what's next really? Do I want to do something else with my life? Even if you've chosen a career path, I think it's always okay to question what you have right now and be able to say, yes, perhaps there's something else I can do with my life as well. I think it's also important to add that. Yes, you have a career, but can you do something else? I think it's always very good to ask yourself that question. I want to add one point. It's also very key to look at, I would say, the job market as well. I understand that when you are doing your bachelor's or your master's, perhaps you don't have very good insights into the job market. I think it's very important for you to understand what are some of the fields that are really recruiting that need some specific skills as well, so that you kind of try to tailor your career accordingly. Of course, you should not go off track completely, but I think it's very important for you also to watch out the job market as well. Very important, so that once you are out there, there are jobs waiting for you, basically. I know today people are talking about AI. I've been asking myself, should I do another degree in maybe something related to AI, so that maybe in the next 5 to 10 years, I'm able to respond to the demand of the job market. Yeah, let me stop here, and it's a pleasure again, and I'm sure we are going to enjoy the next 1 hour. Thank you.
Thank you very much for your response. If I'm not sure if Ms. Jocelyn Palopoulos is here, but if let's see if there's any other panelists that are here that would like to speak as well briefly. You're welcome, please. I'm not able to see everyone.
I think Dorcas is here.
Oh, okay. Yes, please, if you would
Yeah.
like to say anything.
Hi, Rachel. It's so nice to hear from Thank God and Melas. I hope I pronounced it correctly. It's really an opportunity to speak to young people like myself about building a career path and how to get to choose what career path to pursue. Referencing what Melas and Thank God has mentioned, the first fundamental thing is really passion, because building a career in the food security and agriculture space really requires you to be very passionate about it, because it involves a lot of on the ground working, it involves a lot of analysis, research analysis, it involves a lot of stakeholder management where you have to interact with a number of people. It requires you to be quite adaptable to varying circumstances. So these are some of the fundamental skills that you need to really build and start to explore as you are climbing a career like that. The first, the most fundamental thing to also understand is uh, at some point you really get to decide if this is what you want to do for yourself, and if it is, then you put in so much energy into building that career, and if it's not, you get to invest in whatever it is you want to do. I think the first fundamental thing you need to do is to make that decision, because it involves a lot of back-breaking work, and most of the time it's not like other career paths where there are symposiums or there are awards celebrations where they celebrate all of these people who are doing the background work. So because of that, it's most of your efforts may likely go unthanked, but nonetheless, you know that you're making significant contribution to whatever or wherever you find yourself. So I would say that the key skills and competencies that fresh graduates need to build should be around a mix of both technical and soft skills. it's good to be quite technical to know what the, pardon my French, what the jargons, what the technical jargons are in terms of plant breeding, selection, variety selection. But all of these do not translate to impact if you do not have the soft skills to translate them into impact. So I struggled with this quite a lot when I was starting out my career. I really had to take a break from having technical experience to building my soft skills around public speaking, around engaging with development organizations so I was able to scale my research outputs into impacts on the field. I had to learn how to be a problem solver. I had to learn teamwork. I had to learn how to be adaptable. And all of these things can be acquired through internships, like thank God had rightly mentioned, can be also expressed through volunteer work. I would advocate a lot for young people like myself to really, really put in effort into voluntary work through internships, participation in student organizations, and really taking online courses. It's good to be a breeder, and I mean, it's good to build career in breeding, but a lot of your work needs to be translated on the field. So, in as much as you're concentrating your efforts in and at the start of the food chain, if I can say so, a lot of your impact needs to be felt by the farmer in the remote location, in the most remote parts of the world. So, and the only thing that can translate or that can transfer all of this impact is the soft skills you build along the way. So, building all of these skills will also enable you to position yourself to be seen, to speak a lot about your work using social media. I am a huge advocate of that. Using social media as a tool to advocate about what you do and some of the impact you're also making. And with that, you start to build your own network of professionals along the way. Start to get invited to speak at conferences, attend workshops, and attend seminar. And you also should position yourself to begin to join professional organizations and groups where you get to meet like-minded individuals and you just get to build your capacity along the way. I would say that fundamentally, it is quite important to build your technical capacity, but at some point, at a stage in your career, it's not enough. A number of people already know what you know, so you need then to position yourself to build your soft skills around people management. Because I know a number of plant breeders are quite introverts because of the years of research and the efforts they put into developing their research outputs. So at a point as you are climbing your career, you then need to learn people management skills. I struggled with that a lot, and that's why I'm emphasizing on that. It needs to be learned urgently. People skills, people development skills, how to relate, how to manage stakeholders, and as you are looking to invest in scaling your research outputs, you also need a bit of private sector experience that can help you scale out all of the outcomes you've been able to get over the years. So I think these are some of the fundamental things I'm just going to start my conversation with. So thank you very much.
Thank you so much for the great insights. There's lots of good advice in there, and I'm hearing a lot about passion. So that's wonderful to know. There are actually two questions in the chat, both for Mr. Thank God, specifically about cassava, but perhaps the other panelists, you're welcome to share your own insights about your respective fields too. So I will read these together since they're both related to cassava breeding. So the first one is, can you mention a few current gaps in cassava breeding and what is your research line, if you want to elaborate on that? And the second is a comment. I read that we can't export our cassava grown in Nigeria due to the fact that it's not meeting the needed nutrition requirement. Can you shed more light to it? And are there any measures that are in place for that?
Yeah, thank you so much, Risha. That is a nice one. Thank you, Mr. Femi. Yeah, talking about the current gap in cassava research, as we keep saying, the world is changing. There's issue of climate change. There are a lot of innovations. There are a lot of cassava research that has been done. Whereas the impact is very, very, very important, just as one of my colleagues have talked about impacts. So it's not all about developing, it's now about delivering. Because at the end of every innovation and research, the outputs and who are the final end users of these innovations. For example, there are a lot of presentations that have been going on in terms of development of these, developing the yield, developing agronomy traits. Doing all of these are being all of these are research work that are happening in the lab. But the issue there is that after development, what will happen to delivery? That is where the impact of most of our product and our research come to stay. And looking at the gap in cassava breeding, there are a lot of changes. When you look at some of the traits of cassava, for example, we have over 56 varieties of cassava here in Nigeria developed for Nigeria agroecology alone. And when you are looking at Africa as a whole, we have over 400 different varieties of cassava. But whereas some of these varieties, they have stayed for over 20, 30 years, a lot of things are happening. The climate is changing, the environment is changing. So there are more things to do. You will discover that some of those cassava that have such powerful traits, when they have been released, are now breaking down the traits. And a lot of climate is happening on some of those things, then the shelf life of the products. So there are a lot of things like looking at cassava. Basically, it's not just the root of cassava. We are looking at the stems properties as well. We are looking at the shelf life of cassava roots. We are looking at the shelf life of cassava stem. So there are a lot of innovations and even some of the yield and some of the trade that has been improved. Basically, concentration is on the starch content of cassava, which is the dry yield. But whereas there are more research gap now that is talking about the nutritional properties of cassava, how can we get biofortified cassava developed? How can we meet this issue of hidden hungers, especially in sub-Saharan Africa, where there are a lot of hungers, there are a lot of issues, there are a lot of climate change? How can we make our cassava varieties more resilient? And these are a lot of research questions that we keep asking. The climate have changed. A lot of things are happening. So the cassava you know yesterday may not be the cassava you are seeing today. So you still need to go back to your breeding efforts. Although before now it has just been classical breeding, traditional breeding method, but now we have been able to integrate some of those modern breeding technologies. Now we have been talking about the issue of leaving just conventional breeding and integrating genomic selection, molecular breeding, and the like. Whereas some breeding effort is still going into GMO, which we are still trying to pilot. But remember, most of these African countries, they have not accepted some of those innovations. So there are still a long way to go in order, and there are some traits, of course, that you cannot develop using the conventional or the classical method. You just have to integrate or use some other method, breeding tools to complement this gap. For example, trait like shelf life is a very big issue for us. You know, cassava roots, before 24 hours, you start seeing the root deteriorating. So this have to do with the issue of shelf life. It's a good research gap for us in cassava. And looking at also the stem, durability of stem, reliability of stems. Most of the cassava seed, they cannot stay for some days. So these are some of the traits that are also critical. These are some of the gaps that we are trying to fill. And also looking at some of what is happening in the aspect of a new infection of diseases, especially some part of the East Africa where we have some strains of CBSD, that is cassava brown leaves disease. You know, these are some of the strains of cassava disease that are upcoming. So as research is breeding effort is going on, there are a lot of findings, there are a lot of issues coming up, challenges. So the breeding continues, and these are some of the gaps because we need to have a resilient cassava that can withstand the current agroecology. As I said, climate change is global issues. So things are happening, so we need to keep working on the cassava varieties. We need to get resilient materials that can withstand the current climate condition. Then, of course, we want to increase yield per unit area, looking at urbanization, where a lot of youths that are to go to farm are migrating into the urban cities. So you need to get more breeding effort that will keep increasing the yield per unit area, so that even those in the urban area, they can have small land and also cultivate and get the same yield. So there are a lot of gap in terms of cassava breeding. We are working more, partnering with a lot of research, a lot of projects. We are also adopting a lot of innovations, breeding tools, the speed breeding, the model breeding tools as well. And even in some cases, we are piloting some issues on the transgenic breeding because there are some traits, as I said, classically or conventionally, you cannot improve. So you have to like leverage on some of those breeding tools to also help out. So these are some of the research gaps that we are trying to meet up to work on now, even in the cassava breeding program. Then the other question as well is talking about please, can I get the next questions? I don't know if I'm making sense here or you can.
Yes, this is great. Thank you so much. Really great discussion. I'll
I
also,
think
Oh, please go ahead.
The next question is talking about exporting cassava root, right? Yeah, the next question is talking about exporting cassava root. Of course, our breeding design have changed totally because we are not just looking at development, variety development any longer. We are looking at delivery, we are looking at commercialization. So we are looking at product cycle. These are some innovations that we are working with the CGIR breeding program to also integrate into our system. So research is now beyond just researching. Research is now demand-led research in terms of cassava development. It's more like demand-led. We are coming from the bottom up. So that means you have to go to the end users. We are working with industries, we are working with farmers. We need to know what they want because you cannot be there to design a trait that cannot fly. So we work with them to look at the challenges, to look at the traits. So we work with industries that have preference for a particular trait. We collaborate with them and we develop varieties that can meet up that standard. Talking about exportation is a general problem from Nigeria for now. So exporting agricultural produce is a challenge. You need to get all the certification, not just national certification. We are talking about the global certification. You have to have all the standard requirements, all it takes for you to be able to package your product. So in that case, the issue of the whole
Salada. Oui. Mais tu payes.
I apologize. I think you are being muted, so maybe if you go ahead, thank you.
Yeah. So in that case, the whole system in the value chain of cassava is very, very critical. Unlike now, you cannot say, oh, I am a breeder, and you are just looking at the art and science of breeding alone. Now you incorporate what is called business in breeding, because at the end of your product, you want it to go out. And by doing that, you are bringing in the business aspect of it. You are bringing in the commercialization aspect of it. You are bringing out what will make that innovation to fly, what will make it more acceptable out there. So we are making more effort to be able to also work on the quality of the products because rejection comes by quality of the products. Now, and there are a lot of things to be done when it comes to quality because you harvest your roots, you need to preserve the roots to the standard that can be acceptable even to the end users or wherever you are exporting it to. So that becomes the issue of quality traits, quality standard. When you have all this certification, you look at how the packaging will look like. Because of course, if deterioration sets in, they will reject your products. So you need to follow up the whole standard certification process. Even right now, we do export cassava stems to some African country. But now, when we are talking about the root still there is issue of PPD, which is post-harvest deterioration, either primary or secondary. So the root is a perishable commodity that can deteriorate within a short period of time. So your packaging become a very good insight issues to think about when you want to package cassava root for export. And if you want to process it into dry chips, you should know all the standard procedure. You should know the content of the moisture that is desirable. And who is your client? Who is the customer? Who are your end users? Even when you want to export, you should follow up the standard protocols and give them what they want. And you should be able to export your cassava roots globally. These are some of the challenges. I hope I've made some of the.
Thank you very much for your comments. I would also like to extend a similar question to the other panelists. If you would like to identify any gaps in your areas of work, how this can be filled by incoming people who are interested in the field, and what are some plans to fix these challenges?
Yeah, thanks a lot. And before perhaps answering the question, I wanted to say one thing. When I saw the question in the chat talking about research gaps, I thought it'd be good to perhaps flag that as well for our friends who are in this meeting. It's beautiful to be a researcher. It's maybe that's your passion. You're a researcher. Maybe you are doing your master's right now. Very passionate about publishing papers. Maybe your aim is to publish 10 papers in the next 5 years. That's beautiful. It's also a good thing to be a PhD student, to be working on research projects. But one key thing is to make sure that your research is really, it can be translated into something practical on the ground. It's basically community related. And I can share this as well. I think I got some opportunities in the past few years, perhaps because of some of the work that I've done when I was doing my first master's, for example. So just wanted to flag that as well. Let's not be, we are very passionate about research, but let's not do research for the sake of doing research. I believe, thank God, or other, colleagues in the meeting have said this as well. Let's make sure that it's really responding to needs, and but not only responding to needs, let's make sure that when you speak about your research somewhere, someone says, yes, please come and work with me, because people need you. Like, people, when you're in a job market or when you're working, you believe that, sometimes we feel that, we are applying for a job, we really want that job. But let me remind you one thing: organizations do need you as well. If you are bringing something to the table, and I think even in my organization, we celebrate when we get someone who is very good at what he's doing. I'm very happy when I'm working with someone who is very good at his job. It makes my job much easier. It makes the life of the entire organization easier. We're able to achieve our goals and objectives. So let's not just get buried into research work. Yes, excellent, but let's make sure it's something like when I talk about my research somewhere, someone can say, yes, we can indeed use this to do this. We can implement, we can transform your research into a community project. I think it's very good. And if you can do that, I'm sure that, even when you are still completing your PhD or you are still completing your master's and you apply for an internship, people would say, no, you can't be an intern. You have the technical skills. And we believe that we can give you a proper job. Now, talking about gaps in my field, I will talk about food fortification or food systems more broadly, the food industry or food processing industry. I think one key thing is, how do we tailor some of the globally available technologies to perhaps some of the, I would say, resource constrained settings, or maybe settings where perhaps technology is not highly developed yet. I think that's one of the key challenges as well. How do we make sure that some of the global solutions that worked elsewhere can be tailored to, let me say, the African context, for example? How do we make sure that we are able to use some of those globally available technologies to that context and making it work for people? One key thing is really, we work in food fortification. I'm sure you've heard about the word large-scale food fortification, which is different from biofortification. I'm also trying to be careful not to make this session, it's supposed to be career development. I don't really want to talk about technical concept here. How do we make sure we're able to fortify what goes into the plates or what goes into the stomach of the most vulnerable populations? How do we make these solutions accessible? I think that's one of the key gaps that we are trying to see. So that has to do with coverage. If we fortify foods that are being processed by large industries, and if we assume that people, people living in resource constrained settings are really purchasing their food from local markets, how do we make sure that indeed, if we fortify the foods, those who are living in those resource constrained settings are able to access them? The challenges are very many. Yeah. Also, I will talk about quality and compliance. We are living in settings where it's very hard to, just adhere to the basic quality, principles. I'm talking about food quality. I guess that also applies to many other fields as well. It's also a very big constraint or big gap that we are working on. How do we make quality accessible? How do we ensure that people understand what quality means? How do we make people understand that, people really understand and digest the concept of, good, high quality food, the food that you are consuming is of quality. The other thing is also compliance. I also believe this is something very cross-cutting, because even if you don't have a standard, I'm sure that for anything that you do or in your different fields, you have maybe a code of practice, or just a document which outlines what to do. We've realized that in many countries around the world, we do have standards in place that guide maybe the production of different foods. I'm not even just talking about fortified foods, but even maybe in Nigeria, for example, you have standards for beans and different food commodities. We realize that it's very hard for, the compliance level to those standards is quite low as well. So that's one key gap. How do we make sure that we increase the compliance rate so that, the producers, the industry, they are really compliant to what is established in those standards? But it also really applies much more to when, we are talking about fortified foods as well. Let me stop here. Of course, we have things on supply chain related challenges, and as I said, I really don't want to delve into technical concepts here, but it was important for me to make the first one. Whatever you are doing right now, please, even right now, ask yourself, if I speak about my research, will someone who is working at the World Vegetable Center, someone who is working at Africa Rice, someone who is working at IITA, someone who is working at ICRISA, will they really say, yes, this is ringing the bell, we need this young man in our team? Make sure you do that, and I think that will help you a lot. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Ms. Dorcas, do you have any insights or have you identified any challenges that you think early career professionals can help fill?
Yes, definitely. I will just start with giving a bit of a background of what I do. I currently work as a consultant at Sahel Consulting, Agriculture and Nutrition Limited. It's a management consulting firm that focuses on building and scaling out research innovations in Abuja, Nigeria. So what we do at Sahel is to develop strategic plans and really to make strategic efforts for scaling out research out. And although Tango already mentioned, and the last speaker also did the same, where they mentioned that it's quite tempting for a number of researchers to really just focus on their work and not necessarily concerned about scaling out all of these efforts. What we do at Sahel is to ensure that all of these research innovations at the breeder level is being scaled out to the farmers in the last mile, meaning the farmers in the remote areas. And one of the gaps that is quite fundamental and I would say is quite tailored to the Africa food ecosystem would be the lack of relevant region-specific market information about some of the agricultural landscape in West Africa. So this means that for a breeder who really wants to go about scaling out his research innovation has nothing to work with. So what we do at Sahel is to develop this market research data to ensure that it matches the efforts of the breeding institutes with what is obtainable in the market in terms of the demand for that particular food, in terms of the exports of that particular food, and so on and so forth. So we use digital tools and platforms to conduct market analysis, market data analysis, and streamline the entire research process to ensure that it's quite sustainable. So as a result of that, we do a lot of backbreaking work, gathering all of this information and making sure it's available for the researchers to make decisions. But most fundamentally, one major gap I would also quite uh, that has really stood out for me is the lack of synergy between the research and the private sector. So fundamentally, to ensure that progress is being made, there should be a lot of coordination between the research bodies, the research institutes, and the private sector. Research, although they are starting to understand what the importance of scaling out efforts, but it's still not primarily their major concern. While the private sector is really focusing on building and scaling out efforts, they really do not have the tangible research to do that. So there should be a lot of coordination around scaling out efforts and making sure that all of the successes the breeders, the innovations the breeders are working on is being scaled out and ensure that the farmers or whoever the recipient is has enough innovation to work with. As a result of that, most of these efforts are sort of are in isolation and not well coordinated. And because of these challenges, we then have to do a lot of it's really a middleman work, making sure that there's a lot of synergy between the research community and the private sector. I would also say that one other gap I also noticed in my line of work is that development organizations are sort of working in isolation. There's not a lot of synergy within the donor working organizations and scaling out all of these efforts to meet the demands of the farmers or the demands of the people in the last time. So as a result of that, you realize that a number of, of donor organizations are replicating the same efforts, and that is not really helpful for farmers who are based in the last mile. So it's important for us to have that synergy across multiple intervention programs, across multiple countries, and across multiple value chains. This will ensure that success is sustained And it will also ensure that whatever innovation or research outputs the breeders are working on, it is scaled on a larger scale. Having pockets of successes is really not sustainable in the long run. It's important for us to synergize efforts, to build collaboration, to engage as much stakeholders as we want, to involve the private sector in the development and scaling of all of these research innovations, and to ensure that each individual along the food value chain are playing their roles sustainably in a sustainable manner to ensure continued success. So that's some of the gaps that I can just summarize. There's quite a number of them, but that's really what's fundamental to the work I do. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much for your response. I believe Edwin has a question. You have your hand up if you would like to unmute yourself and share.
Yeah, thank you very much, Rachel. So I have a question for the panelist. So I am a young aspiring researcher, and one of the things that bothers me is that is what kind of skills do I need to build to be an efficient and a very good researcher? And I believe almost all of us here are either plant scientists or aspiring to be plant scientists. And today, most of the research that we do are interdisciplinary. For instance, if you are doing plant breeding, then you need to understand some genomics, understand molecular biology, understand some agronomy and all of that. So now you realize that there are all of these disciplines that come into play for you to be able to perform your research and especially use the contemporary tools that are available now. So now my question is that do I build skills in all of these areas, which I might not be able to master all of these areas, or do I focus on just one of the areas and master that? I don't know if I I asked the question right, but
Yeah. Can I come in here? Okay.
Yes, we can hear you. Thank you.
Yeah. Yeah. Just as you rightly mentioned, I will use myself as an example. I started my career with the cassava breeding unit where we have a lot of breeders. We have a lot of quantitative genetics. We have a lot of molecular breeders. We have a lot of biostatisticians. So I think one thing you should know is look at your strengths and your areas of competence. It's a good idea to have idea about the whole thing. Of course, as a breeder, you just need to have ideas on how to interpret even molecular data, on how to do analysis, scientific writing. These are general things you should know, especially like journals, publications, communication, just as Doc has rightly mentioned. We should be able to have all those soft skills, communication skills, writing skills. But when it comes to area of competence, like personally, I deviated from this aspect of statistics because I'm not the kind of person that want to sit down one place and be opening computers whereby my computer will crash because of heavy data and the like. I want to go out. I want to be in the field. So I developed my skills around the seed system. And now the seed system is intermediary intersection between the breeding and the farmers, between the breeding and agronomy. So there are a lot of competence in the areas of breeding as well. We need social scientists. We need those that are experts in the field of genders. We need those people that are experts in the field of food systems, agronomy, seed system, as you mentioned. So now it's just for you to see the area that you are so much interested in, build your competence and masters that area, whereby you can become like a champion in that field. But that doesn't neglect the fact that you should have an idea about the general breeding aspects. Of course, my competence in breeding is more like pedigree, classical breeding, but that doesn't mean I don't know more about molecular breeding. I have idea about speed breeding. I have an idea about transgenic. That should be an idea. But my major interest and my core competence is in the aspect of seed systems. So you look at it that, a lot of industries, for example, by now you should have a focus of the type of industry you want to work with. You can go in doing research about the service and the product. What do they want? For example, a NGO is different from a private organization. Some organizations are there, they are into production, they want to make money. So as well, you have to build your profile and your competence towards that. For example, you may say, oh, I want to work with Monsanto, Syngenta agrochemicals, they are into agrochemicals and all that. So you now build your skills. Of course, you have to master one area where you will be a champion that they can call upon. Personally, there are a lot of areas to build, but you cannot master the whole thing, as you said. There are some people that are good at mathematics, quantitative work. They want to sit with their system to do any kind of analysis. They keep upgrading their analytical skills. So if you want to build you can go into quantitative genetics, you can go into biometricians, where you can use Pythons, R, and all this. So there are different areas to master your rules, but then you should have an idea all around, because it's good as a breeder. You should be able to interpret results, you should be able to run analysis, you should be able to know how analysis is being done, but that may not be your core competence. But there should be an area where you can build your skills. That is why the issue of research, developing, going for programs, keep equipping yourself. There is this issue of AI now. A lot of things are changing, so even right in that area that you want to be, there are still upgrades, there are still challenges that will come up. So you keep upgrading your skills towards that area. When you mention my name now, even in cassava breeding, you know that I'm in C system. Anyone can say, oh, this person is in C system. So I'm trying to integrate what the breeding activity is to the seed work. Because at the end of breeding varieties, you need to consider the seed that you want to take to farmers and end users. So, and I also work with the industries to decide what a breeder also wants. So I am like an intermediary between a breeder and the end users that will take the research products at the end of the day. So, but you can work on mastering a particular skills or area. If it's quantity, some people are good at mathematics. If you are not good at mathematics or you don't like analysis, there is no point trying to build your skills towards biometrics and the like, where you have to subject yourself to Python, a lot of programming and the likes. So you can find a way to have an idea about the whole thing, because it encompasses different fields actually, and that is where breeding is going to now. We cannot work without the social work, we cannot work without social scientists, we cannot work without gender, we cannot work without the C system, agronomies, and the even private sectors now are coming in to champion the product. That comes with the aspect of product suitability, product design. Your area may just be product designing products. You know, products have a life cycle. After maturity, they decline. What happens? So you have to build your skills where you can be looking at designing products, upgrading products, coming with the challenges that encompasses product development and the likes. So, but then as a professional breeder, scientist, expert, you should have an idea about eventually everything. You know, Dorcas was talking about soft skills. You should know how to communicate, you know how to write, you know how to handle social handles, you know how to
Thank you very much for your comments. Melas, I think you had your hand up earlier. Did you have anything to add?
No, I fully agree with what Tengo was saying earlier.
articles, and I think I can read.
Please go ahead. Sorry.
No worries. I guess he's having network issues. Yeah, I was saying that I fully agree with what Tengo was saying earlier. I think one key, I would say, golden rule is, don't be all over the place. And I think when you're in a technical field, that's where you've got to be a bit careful. I'm not saying this to scare anyone, but you can't be the expert kind of in every field. When people say, in my field, when you're talking about food safety, you are there. Food fortification, you are there. Biofortification, you are there. You know everything. People will doubt you. I think you've got to be careful about that as well. You need to really make sure you choose one specific field where you can really go deep. Of course, when you're at the beginning of your career, you can explore different fields. You can just try to have general concept and general knowledge about those fields. But then at some point, I think it's more strategic for you to really choose one and dive deep into it and really understand the ins and outs and become an expert. Because I don't think, in every field, we don't have, thousands of experts, but we have many generalists. Like we have people who, I don't say who know everything, who can speak about everything, but it's very hard to find very good experts. But at the same time, I think one thing I'm also doing at a personal level as well is that while I'm progressing my career, sometimes I look back a bit, but I wonder, should I then perhaps add this to my plate. You of course you can choose one specific field, but then as you progress, because you are exploring as well, and you are getting to know other fields as well. So as you proceed, it's always good to be open-minded as well and say, could this be the right combination for me? But then I would say don't add too much as well. You can just add one which is really complementing that, so that yeah, your field is not too narrow as well. Like if you can add one thing which is really complementing, I mean one technical field which is really complementing what you're doing, I think that's okay. We are not saying okay, just choose one and that's it. If you feel you have the bandwidth, if you feel you're passionate, again, passion is here. If you feel you can still add one thing which really complements what you're already doing, I would say, yeah, please go ahead and do it. And again, stress now the soft skills part as well, communication. One good thing is also critical thinking. In some fields, even if it's a technical field, you might not really be an expert, but if you can think critically, it's just easy for you to solve the issue as well. That's very key as well. And how do you get tech, how do you make sure you become a critical thinker? It's by using your brain, by really, I would say, putting your brain at a test and making sure that you're able to, when you face an issue, you're able to think deeply and you're able to come up with creative solutions as well. Critical thinking is one. Communication, writing skills. When you write an email, and sometimes I'm working with someone, they send me an email now, like who has sent me this email? You kind of go and check the name, like this is impressive. These things really will make you stand out as well. You can know everything in this world, but if you don't know how to put it, if you don't know how to structure a very good email, if you open your mouth, you're not able to really, say things that would resonate with people. If you can't structure your ideas in a way that will make it easier for people to understand what you're saying, I think it will be very hard for you to fly. It will be very hard for you to stand out. So just wanted to emphasize that as well. When you find yourself in a job, in an organization, you work with different kinds of people. I would say, like, you might feel this person is very arrogant. You might feel this person doesn't greet you when he or she comes to the office. You need to be able to learn to work with all kinds of people, because when you go out there, especially when you're working in an international organization, you can meet someone and you're like, I don't really like this guy, but you've got to work with that person. You need to learn to accept others as well, and that goes to the point of being really agile, being flexible, being open-minded, not being too quick to judge. No one is perfect in this world. So I understand that when you're studying and perhaps your classmate does something, you really hold it, like, no, I don't really like him. No, in the job market, you won't fly that way. In the job market, you've got to be open-minded. You've got to learn to work with everyone. I think that's also one of the key, to me, skills that one needs to have as well. Learn to work with everyone. But of course, you need to have boundaries as well. It has limits. If it goes beyond certain point, you should flag your manager, depending on how your teams are structured. But you need to learn to work with people. You need to learn to collaborate and be open-minded, be agile, be flexible. Yeah.
Thank you very much for your comments. Since we are closing on time, perhaps I'll go to the next question and let Dorcas start with the answer. Samuel, would you like to ask your question?
Just a quick question. Picking up from where Melas you talk about learn to work with everyone. So my question is, I know we have a very interesting environment in Africa where sometimes our boss are rigid, sometimes they look very hard. So I wanted to ask, I mean, any of the panelists could contribute. How do you deal with difficult boss? um, how were you able to cope if you've encountered it? How did you deal with it? And if you've not encountered it, what do you suggest? Because we need these people maybe for recommendations, for networking and all of that. And how do we deal with them? Thank you.
I will take a stab at that because it's quite an interesting question. So I'll just start out with saying one of the fundamentals of skills a professional needs to build is people management. You need to learn how to manage people. And this then comes to test when we are met with various kinds of managers or team leaders you need to report your activities to, and you need to also have their buy-in as much as possible to whatever progress you want to make in your work. So fundamentally, I would say it's important to document, always document whatever agreement you could have with that difficult manager. Make sure that you also learn how to manage the person back. Management is not a one-way thing, it's a two-way thing. As the person is managing you, you're also managing that relationship by always documenting your agreement and always making sure that you turn in your deliverables timely and you really do not have you're not lacking really on what you have committed yourself to do. It is important to be a person of your word. So if you say you'll be turning out this report at a particular time, make sure that on your front it is quite clear that there's nothing that is holding you back from there's nothing that's holding you back from your man, or there's nothing your manager is really holding against you when it comes to your work. Make sure that you do your work very well, and if feedback is provided, make sure you implement those feedback to a large extent. And when it then, if that is quite clear and you are on top of things with what you're supposed to do, it becomes easy for you to manage the person. Then you will then be sure that it's not a personal vendetta. I mean, it's nothing personal. I keep telling my team members, it is nothing personal. We came here to work, to make impact, to earn a living for ourselves. So, as much as possible, if there's any clash of interest or if there's any misunderstanding, it should be clear and it should be on the boundaries of the work that we do. And because of that understanding, you you should then have a conversation. If you realize that you've done everything you're supposed to do, but this person is still being unnecessarily difficult with you, then you need to have a conversation with him to understand what exactly he needs you to do. So I would say just walk up to the person and say, okay, I believe we need to have a conversation because there's some reservations that I have with the way we have been working together. Then make sure the person or the manager then provide very clear feedback on what you're supposed to do and that you're not doing. And if that's clear, then if that is clear, then you both are on the same page. The person doesn't have to be friendly. I mean, we came here to work. I do not have to be your friend. I don't owe you any form of friendship or any form. It's really to just have that cordial relationship. So to just have a good working relationship. It's nothing personal and all of that. And I've also noticed over the years, very difficult managers are quite interesting because they sort of have so much belief and confidence in you and do not want you to slack. Most of my best managers I've had are quite difficult managers because at the end of the day, you realize that the level of growth you also build over the years, it makes you very independent, and you also tend to make quite tough decisions on the spot because because they are putting on the spot. So as a result of that, I've been able to make so much progress working with I do not want to say difficult, but like a demanding manager who requires so much. So, like I've said, the three key pointers: make sure that from your end there's nothing slacking on your end. You are delivering on everything you have decided to do. You have quite some deliverables. So, have a personal conversation with this person to understand what their perspective is, and three, just understand that it's nothing personal and you are just paid to do what you have to do. So, that's fundamental. Thank you.
Thank you very much for your feedback. I apologize, Mila. So we do have one final question that I would like. So perhaps if you're able to put your comments in the chat, and I'll open for one final question if the panelists want to briefly comment. I see there's someone with your hand up. You can go ahead and unmute yourself if you would like.
Yes, thank you, Rachel. This is Carlos Iglesias here from North Carolina State University. As a professor in plant breeding, we struggle, I would say, not so much on the technical side. Any graduate from North Carolina State or any other university, companies or institutions hiring plant breeders know that technically they are prepared. It's the other side, the soft skills, the communication, the leadership skills, and particularly the team participation, team working skills, which we are not providing to our students. And I wonder if the panel can elaborate a bit about how do you see, what's the role of the universities on this? Because we cannot just produce this product that is just technically capable, but then they go to the job market and they do not succeed because, like in plant breeding, more and more is a teamwork. You cannot have all the skills. You have to team up with people, okay? So there's soft skills right there, okay? So just wanted to hear from the opinion from the panelists. Thank you so much for this wonderful event, okay?
Thank you so much for your question. We only have about 1 minute, so if any of the panelists would like to very quickly share your feedback about the question.
Fully agree on, the need for, acquiring the soft skills. I think we've spoken about that, so I fully agree with him. I think one thing that I really wanted to put out there before the close of this session is to say that in a job environment or in an organization, don't be too quick to judge or don't be too quick to take things personally. And I think that relates to the previous question as well. Sometimes you might think that your boss is very difficult, but maybe that person is trying to help you. So just look at yourself as well and try to see if, try to understand if what the person is saying also makes sense as well. So I think perhaps they're just, making your life a bit hard just to help you adjust as well and learn new things, especially if you're at the beginning of your career. Don't assume to know everything because perhaps that difficult manager is trying to help you, but never try to fight your boss as well. Because I believe when someone recruits me in the team, I always believe that I'm there to support them. But of course, it can really, go beyond some limits or boundaries, and of course there are always some units in the organization to which you can flag that issue to. But then always be positive and kind of have that genuine conversation with the person you're working with. We sometimes are very quick to judge. We have our egos and taking things personal. I don't think it's the right way of doing things. Yeah. Thank you.
Thank you so much for your feedback, and thank you to all the panelists for your responses. If you have any more advice for graduate students or early career professionals, and you have a minute, we would love for you to put anything in the chat that you would like to share, and we can keep the discussion going. I really want to give a special thank you to you all. We appreciate you being here and sharing your journey so far with us. And thank you to all the participants for your great questions. I will now pass it on to Amaka to introduce our next speaker.